So I'll go ahead and start because we can do some of the housekeeping up front. Thank you for joining this afternoon for the Actian session that I'm going to deliver. The housekeeping is that you may be aware we're giving away an Apple Watch at the end of the presentation today. There are some requirements, though. You have to have 5 keys, those little paper keys. If you have all those and you've already filled out the little form, you're in the bowl and in the draw. If you don't, then you need to fill out that little form so you can get in the bowl between now and the end of the presentation. So apparently if you're missing like card 4 or 5, that's okay. The ladies in the back of the room in the blue shirts will swap your card 4 or 5 missing for the coupon that you fill out. You'll be in the bowl. And then we'll do the draw at the end. So yes, you do have to stay and listen to me present to qualify for that fishbowl. So my name is Mike Hoskins. I'm the CTO, Chief Technical Officer of Actian Corporation. I'll be with you for the next 40 minutes. Because of the draw, we may not have time for questions at the end. We'll see how I get through this. It's a new presentation for me. And if we don't, I'm hanging out anyway, so you can find me in the hallway if you need to. The CTO role at Actian is kind of a corporate evangelist role, a Mr. Outside role, so I get to see everything that's going on in the industry. I get to talk about to every one of our most advanced prospects and users, and a lot of that feedback has gone into this presentation. So I've given this a lot of thought. You can see the title. Quick show of hands, how many of you in the room are users, or your businesses are users of one of these databases, the Oracle, Teradata, SQL Server? Wow. I think the easier question is there anybody who's not a user of any of those databases? Very good. Wins the prize. So that's the topic. It's pretty aggressive. It's pretty bold. The good news is I'm not going to be making stuff up. I'm going to be reporting back from the trenches, from our customer scenarios, our prospect scenarios, about this exact question. Can we replatform those enterprise analytic workloads to Hadoop? The agenda is a little bit on Actian and background and then right into the meat. You see a few ticklers there. Are we going to make it with our traditional legacy databases? Are they serving us on their enterprise analytic workloads? Can I replatform to Hadoop? Let's find out. First on Actian, we're a big player in the industry. We're north of $100 million in software. Makes us one of the biggest private software companies in the world. We've been shipping data infrastructure, data management, database technology for 30 years. We've got 10,000 plus customers. We answer the phone in every language and every major geography in the world. We have incredibly deep roots in the software industry, especially data management and data infrastructure. Over the last couple of years, we spent nearly $300 million to acquire what I think is the most outstanding, next generation, modern, a word you'll hear me use a lot today, modern, super scaling, hyper parallelized infrastructure that lives right smack on top of Hadoop and allows you to do next generation advanced analytics inside your Hadoop infrastructure. You'll see some of the logos up there. I'll call out Amazon Web Services. You probably know the Redshift product. If you don't know, Redshift is our product. Redshift is a 100% OEM license of one of our columnar analytic database technologies. So we've got the real goods. That's the fastest growing AWS service ever in the history of Amazon. So I'm not surprised. That's the future. The future is analytic columnar databases. This is what we offer. It's not going to be a sales pitch today. It's going to be an exploration of the topic, but I wanted you to know. So that's Actian, the company. This is Actian, the offering, if you will. So this is my kind of high-level version. This isn't even the official product sheet, but it gives you an idea of what we do. We call our platform Vortex, so you can think of Hadoop as the underlying infrastructure on top of which you would add very advanced, highly productive, visually driven analytic infrastructure and analytic tooling to help you build analytic pipelines. That's my view of what's going on. Everybody in the room, all of us are building analytic pipelines. We're instrumenting the universe. Operational systems are no longer just your SAP system. They're your refrigerator, your car, your watch. Everything is an operational system. And as we instrument the universe, that universe generates an infinite stream of timestamped digital data events. And we have to eat those events, traditional business events, new human click type events, Internet of Things machine generated events, and we have to capture them someplace, probably HDFS or something like that. We have to move them through a pipeline of processing, let's call that data preparation, into some kind of analytic goodness, some kind of analytic engine. And of course, the beauty of Hadoop is is it's an open playing field, and there are multiple analytic methods and analytic engines that you can use. We have predictive analytics. There's others that you use, but the one I'm going to focus on today is that purple box, the SQL BI and Analytics. That is our crown jewel inside our Vortex platform offering, the crown jewel, the tall pole in the tent, the thing that leads us, that I think is going to interest you the most, is our SQL and Hadoop database technology. So let's go into that. Well, first, some background on high-level trends. This is my take on what's important. I think for the mature Hadoop users out there, this will be pretty obvious, but just in case. I said I'd use the word modern. Modern software. Modern software is different than legacy software. It is super scaling, it is hyper-parallelized, it understands that data is distributed permanently and forever. It understands that compute is distributed permanently forever on top of that permanently distributed data tier. It's kind of MPP in the platform instead of MPP in the product. And it represents the most violent break in the software industry that I have ever seen, and I've been in it for 35 years. This change effectively marginalizes 99% of the software industry, which is built over the last 10, 20, 30, even 40 years old. Very famous products are single-threaded 35-year-old technologies that have no understanding of the principles that we're using in Hadoop today. The massively distributed data tier, the massively, I mean, if you sat down to write a new software in Hadoop, you're forced to write it massively distributed, super scaling, resilient, hyper-parallelized. That is the nature of the new software paradigm. That is modern software. And guess what? Almost everything we use out there today, and that's going to be a theme I talk about, is not modern. Hence the name I use, legacy software. So those are the patterns that we're familiar with. Those are the patterns that Hadoop is enforcing in a good way. That's modern software. The other trend that I see is the rise of analytic workloads. As I said before, as we instrument the universe, we care less and less about operational systems. They're just humming and buzzing. We care about the events they generate. We eat those events. We study those events. We look inside those events, maybe huge streams of events, to look for those meanings, those patterns, those insights, those models that let us make better decisions, not just in our business lives, but in our personal lives. So that's kind of the standard Hadoop story. That's my version. It is hugely disruptive and breaking the back of much of the traditional software industry. There are those who understand that and are playing and building modern software like us, unlike the people in the room. But there's another space out there, and that's what the topic of this presentation is. What about existing enterprise BI and analytic workloads? So we think Hadoop's pretty cool. 3,000 people here. I've been coming every year for 7 years. I've watched it boom. It's amazing. But it's still 3,000 people. You can go to Dreamforce. It's 80, 90,000 people. That's just one application. If you walked down the street here in San Jose, any street at random, went into any building at random and walked up, said, what's powering your business? How are you doing your data discovery now? How are you doing your query? How are you asking questions of your data? How are you discovering the meaning, the patterns? How do you make decisions? How do you do your analysis? If you found one out of 100,000 that said Hadoop, I'd be stunned. So Hadoop is still the province of early adopters. It's still programmers talking to programmers. Will that be true 10 years from now? No. We have to think about what that means. And it's relevant. It's highly relevant to everybody in the room. It's a huge opportunity. Gartner came out with a study about a month ago, kind of rocked the industry, said Hadoop is challenging for some enterprises. We did a survey the other day. It was almost identical in the results back. I think what that's all about is that it's not mainstream adoption. And we kind of know that. I mean, as big and fantastic as we think it is, it has not hit mainstream adoption at all. So what does the mainstream use? So here's a little picture. I'm going to build this graph as we go through during the day, but here's a start. So I'm talking a lot today about my enterprise analytic workloads, my BI and analytic workloads. And those aren't custom coders sitting in buildings. They were 35 years ago. No, now they use highly visual advanced tooling running on top of database infrastructure. And this is the kind of stuff they run: Tableau, Qlik, Cognos, SAS, MicroStrategy. Everybody in this room has got a company full of users of this. This runs businesses. This is where the action is. This is where they're making decisions. This is where the data is, to a large degree. This is where 99.99999% of BI and analytics is done in the world today. It's a huge, huge space, full of activity. $10 billion a year alone spent on data warehousing. And so that giant space is interesting to me. It's interesting to us at Actian. It should be interesting to people in the room who are users of these technologies. People love these technologies. I go to customers and I say, what is your data warehouse? And they answer, it's Tableau. And I have to smile a little bit because, of course, it's not Tableau, but maybe it is Tableau. Maybe it should be Tableau. Maybe that is their experience. Maybe they love it. Maybe that's where they do their work all day, and it is. So we don't normally talk about that part of the industry because it feels so distant to where we are here at Hadoop Summit. But is it? So let's dive a little deeper into these analytic workloads. So they're pervasive, as I said, they're everywhere. There are 65,000 SaaS shops. There are 800,000 Tableau users, 3 million Excel users. And that's just the standard tools. Then there's custom apps inside corporations by the thousands. Then there's ISV commercial apps that are analytic in nature, that eat data and understand the data and study the data. This is the analytic infrastructure that runs the world, and it's not resting, it's continuing to grow in importance. Analytics is the driver of everything in business today. It's how you expand your revenue, it's how you reduce your costs, it's how you shrink your risk. It is a fact that's pretty, and I really am glad that big data over the last 5 years became big data and analytics, because it's not about the size of the data or anything, it's about the insights that you can derive from it. And so getting those analytics out of your data, we didn't invent that idea at Hadoop. We're doing some amazing analytics at the frontier. We're eating new data sources that have never been done. We're parallelizing machine learning algorithms that have never been parallelized. We're doing huge work. But it's not all the analytics that's done in the world. In fact, it's a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction. And this is what's driving the businesses. And so they're investing more in analytics, and they're investing more in their infrastructure, and they want more out of it. But they're not getting that. Enterprise analytic workloads are starting to break. It's not a very high-tech word, break, but it's what our customers say. We had long internal debates. What's the sophisticated term for this? Running out of gas. They're breaking. So what does breaking mean? It means performance is not keeping up with data volumes. Everybody in the room knows this. That's why there's so much interest in Hadoop. But most of them are living with that pain. They hate it, but they're living with it. And I bet you there's people in this room who understand that exactly. It's not just the performance of data capacity and data volume and single queries. You lack the ability to deploy these new analytic techniques that we're learning so much about. And I'll talk more about this later. Iteration and being able to do discovery across your data sets and test your models and test your algorithms and test your thoughts and iterate across that data. That's critical. You can't do that in an aging, decaying infrastructure. The traditional solutions are too distant from the new data sources that are infusing so much of the analytic insight that we care about. They're too costly. If there's anything I hear that. It's breaking the wall. If you want to do big data with these traditional infrastructures, you need big wallet. And that's no fun. And people are stopping. I think we're reaching a tipping point. That's why I chose this topic today. And finally, they're just built on aging infrastructure that cannot be saved. They're hitting the permanent wall. There is no escape. So users feel trapped in this dead end. They know they want to go somewhere. They want to do something. They want to get in the game in a bigger way, but they're trapped. So what's the weak link? What's trapping them? What's stopping them? Well, it turns out that the analytic tier, and I'm in a multi-tier architecture, I'm only giving you two. There's sort of the top half, the analytic tier, where I do all my analytic goodness, where I'm running my Tableau, and I'm doing my SQL queries, and I'm doing my reports, and I'm doing my dashboards, and I'm doing my ad hoc discovery, and I'm doing my deep iterative discovery, and I'm doing my machine learning algorithms on the data that's in my database. I'm doing all that. But I'm not getting performance out of that bottom tier. Let's call that the database tier. So the analytic tier is nice, a lot of goodness, people love it, and it's bolted to a very aging, creaky, increasingly non-performing database tier that is below it. So why are these databases failing? They're pretty famous. They make a lot of money, tens of billions of dollars a year. They've made hundreds of billions of dollars over the last couple of decades. Well, they're failing for lots of reasons. My one sentence often is, these really important, vital, run-your-life analytic workloads are running on creaky, 35-year-old, row-set, OLTP, transaction baggage-heavy databases. It behooves us to think a little bit. In 2017, in 2 years, Oracle will hit its 40-year anniversary. But you say, okay, well, Oracle's kind of old. There's more important, modern data warehouse products. The Teradata shipped their first parallel data warehouse in 1984. That's 31 years ago. Most databases you in the room are running are built on that foundation of row-set, OLTP, transaction-heavy databases. And they worked okay. In fact, they're really good at operational workloads. That's what they were invented for. And then we started using them in the 90s with BI and data warehousing for analytic workloads. And analytic workloads are good. In fact, if my thesis is right, they're going to run the world. And so we've kind of solved the operational thing. Now we're doing the analytic thing, and we're using these creaky databases, and they sort of worked until they didn't. And that's the moment we're at right now. Not for everybody. Some people have smaller volumes. Some people have more modest appetites. But a lot of people in this room I know, a lot of people all across the world are running into that wall, that breakage in their traditional applications. And so that old technology, you just think of something like row-set. Almost every database we use, including the quote-unquote modern ones that are based on Postgres, another 35-year-old row-set OLTP transaction-heavy database, are not column-based, and yet analytic workloads are overwhelmingly column-based. Almost every column-oriented database architecture screams and destroys in a permanent way, in a permanent price-performing way, traditional row-set database technology. And you can fudge it a little bit. You can say, well, I'm going to start storing my data in columnar on disk. No, that's not going to do you any good. Your core database engine has to be rewritten from scratch. Well, guess what? It's hard to rewrite a database from scratch. Really hard. People are flailing. You see it in the marketplace. Now, why is that such a problem? Why is it so punishing? And I like to tell a story I learned from a data scientist. And I asked them once, you got amazing insights. You're showing me my churn prediction accuracy is going from 2% to 80%. My God, it's $100 million ROI for my business. How'd you do it? The data scientist said, well, I'm a genius. You got to pay me more. No, they didn't say that. Luckily, they said, the key to data science is pretty obvious. I want to eat more data. That means more data sources. Maybe more data volume, maybe 6 months of history is better than 3 months of history if I want to go accuracy. But the killer answer is this one. I need to be able to iterate across my data. I need to be able to test my thesis. Because great science is not recruiting until you find the person with 185 IQ and they sit in the room and they think really hard and they go, I've got the algorithm. No, that's not how it works. It works by average people testing their insights and testing their hypothesis and iterating across the data again and again. Well, if your iteration is slow, you do bad science. You do bad analysis. If you can iterate with your model testing and your discovery and your processes and your result across 200 billion rows comes back in 2 seconds, that's good. If it comes back in 20 minutes, that's bad. How many iterations a day do you get if your job takes 2 hours? 4? What if it took 2 minutes? What if it took 2 seconds? You suddenly become a genius because you can asymptotically approach the most timely and accurate result. And so yeah, performance is everything. And as data gets bigger, as the sources get bigger, as the algorithms get tougher, as the insights get more interesting, then your ability to perform across vast data sets is the difference maker in your ability to do advanced analytics in your business. So that's why the performance edge is so critical. So, what do we do? How do we preserve how do we preserve the upper tier, which has tremendous analytic goodness in it? People like it, they're attached to it, they're connected to it way more than they are the lower bowels of the infrastructure. How do we optimize it? How do we future-proof it? Is it destined to just sit in the corner and be dragged down by the boat anchor? No. No, I think there is an answer out there someplace. So if I look at where we are today, we know that we're running this analytic tier at the top. We know that at the bottom there's kind of the platform we run on. I called it legacy hardware and software platforms, a lot of proprietary stuff in there. And of course, those are the database culprits that are powering 99% of everything we do, including everything that people in the room do. And of course, there's the magic layer in between that I'm going to focus on a lot today, and that's SQL. SQL is so vitally important to enterprise analytic workloads that it is the sine qua non without which nothing will happen in enterprise analytics. That's maybe, a good analyst the other day called it the gateway drug for SQL in Hadoop. If we could just get SQL availability, the skill shortage would evaporate. 3 million SQL programmers out there, largely locked out of Hadoop. What if they could get in the game? What a difference that would make to the skill shortage. What a difference that would make to the productivity leap that's possible in the ecosystem. How many tens of thousands of people would be here interested in kicking the tires? It's hard to know. So, let's get to the meat. Can I do it? Can I re-platform? The answer is yes. Session over? No. Let's go a little deeper. The key is SQL, like I said. SQL is the lingua franca. That's what Tableau speaks. That's what all your applications speak. It's what everything, all that analytic goodness you love, it speaks SQL. It's like SQL tentacles hanging down, for just looking for a database that they can snap into. And it's a standard, and that's good. It's why people say things like SQL 92 and ANSI compliant and standards. It is the single linchpin of the entire world of enterprise analytic workloads. So everybody runs on it. I think they're candidates to re-platform. But is Hadoop ready? Is it ready for these enterprise class workloads? You know, when a Tableau user, I was with a big Hadoop customer the other day, and they said, I don't know why I'm using Tableau all the time, I guess they're ubiquitous, but he said, I said, you're using Tableau, what do you think? He goes, terrible product. I thought, that's kind of weird. How, everybody loves Tableau, how could it be a terrible product? He said, well, here's what happens. I'm running it on Hadoop, I push enter, I change a filter, I push enter on my query, it takes an hour for the query to come back. And I go, oh, what are you connected to? And he goes, well, we're connected to Hive. And I said, oh, you're lucky it only took an hour. He's used to it taking a second. He's used to interactivity with his data. He's used to low latency results. He's used to answers fast. And I guess the assumption is that Hadoop isn't there yet. And of course, that's what we're talking about in the room. So Hadoop is very immature in some areas, very mature in others. In SQL, it's very immature, I believe. The missing piece is just what I say there, a production-grade, enterprise-class, columnar analytic database. If I had one and I could just drop it into Hadoop and everything could bolt onto that, that would be amazing. Is that even possible? Could I think about doing that now? Well, let's take a quick look at the landscape. Legacy players, pretty irrelevant. I think they're going to be irrelevant for a long time. They can announce the acquisition of another immature, non-SQL compliant, non-ACID, unable to bolt Tableau onto a SQL database. Won't help them. They're marginalized, they're outside of Hadoop, they're not Yarn enabled, their engines don't run inside Hadoop, they're not distributed across, they don't obey the patterns of modern software. I don't begrudge them the press releases and the little straw they use to suck the data out of Hadoop to get it back into their platform and become relevant, but no, I think it's game over for some of them. So I don't pay a lot of attention to them. What's going on in Hadoop? In Hadoop is interesting. You have SQL in Hadoop offerings from people like Greenplum and Splice Machine, and I saw Phoenix here at the show, and they're sort of interesting, but you know what? You pull back the covers and every one of them is PostgreSQL, same row set, OLTP, transaction baggage heavy, and I believe that they will be in a permanent price performance deficit, permanent, by using those legacy technologies inside their database offering. And then what about the pure in Hadoop offerings? The Stingers, the Hives, well, not very performant. Impala's kind of the king right now of performance. We've got a really interesting benchmark if you go through our booth where we're 30x faster than Impala on their published benchmarks, in addition to being able to run all the benchmarks, in addition to being fully SQL compliant and every other kind of enterprise class capability. So not bad. Impala's impressive. It's columnar, it's analytic. They understand that if you want to be a player in the next 30 years, you're a columnar analytic database or you go home. There's just not that many out there. It takes a long time to build a production-grade enterprise class, extreme low latency database, a long time. So what can we do? Enter Vector H, that's our offering. So we bought a company called VectorWise. Now, VectorWise is a really interesting company. If you go to the TPCH benchmarks for 1 terabyte, we've been the leader, not Oracle, not SQL, us, little old Actian with our VectorWise database. You go to the 300 gigabyte database size, first place vector, second place vector, third place vector, fourth place vector, fifth place vector. We're fast. We've been around for 10 years. We're a serious columnar analytic database technology. So we're well established. We're completely open at the data tier. So no vendor lock-in. All that goodness that you want is a requirement. It's table stakes. Table stakes in Hadoop are that you're completely open at the data tier, as we are. We have deep innovation. We invented vector processing. So yeah, you look at vector kind of showing up in DB2 Blue, you look at the Stinger team doing vector, you look at the Tungsten project doing hardware optimizations. Doesn't matter what you look at, vector is hot. We invented it. That's why the database is called vector. So this is 10 years of deep innovation and huge spending to build a production-grade, enterprise-class, low-latency, columnar analytic database, and it runs natively in Hadoop. It's a full persistent database. It's not Spark SQL and some of these other query-only engines. By the way, I love them. They're fabulous. They're just proving the point that SQL is the lingua franca for asking questions. We know it. People know it. It would be awesome to be able to ask a question in SQL in the middle of my flow in any product. But that's just query. That's not a database. A database has persistence. It has ACID capabilities. Do you know how many databases in the Hadoop ecosystem are full ACID? I don't know. Is there one other than us? I'd like to see it. I noticed Hive had a session, standing room only, in a room twice this size, because they want to get update and insert. And in a few years, they'll probably have it at a very, very, very low performance level. Are enterprises going to wait for that? I don't know. Is the appetite large? Sold out, standing room only, room twice this size to get ACID type capabilities. Yes, people need a database. They need it with enterprise capabilities, security, user roles, full integration to your corporate security standards. Check, check, check. And finally, you want to be able to connect everything and anything. Cognos, snap. Python, snap. Excel, snap. Tableau, snap. Full ODBC, full JDBC, fully proven, yet running natively in Hadoop. That opens the door to some interesting possibilities. So let's go through this diagram as it might start to look. So we kind of know this is where we are today. Here's the big idea. What if I could look out over the horizon and see something really amazing over there? Hadoop. Hadoop is not my legacy hardware software platform. It's open. It's got great economics. It's increasingly where the data lives. It's got an inherent pattern that forces everything modern in your architecture. And you only develop modern software. Therefore enjoys, in my opinion, again, permanent price performance advantages. But there's Hadoop over there, and here's my complete stack over here. What part of the stack do I love? The top stop? What part of the stack do I not love so much? The bottom part? Well, what if I could do this? What if I could just re-platform? I'm not changing the database. I'm not ripping and replacing databases. I'm re-platforming. I'm saying that analytic workload is goodness. I like it. And all it needs is SQL. But not a legacy, tired, 35-year-old row set OLTP heavy database, but a modern, blindingly fast, scale-out, hyper-parallelized columnar analytic database. That's what I need. But is it there? Where do I go? Do I go someplace and wait 5 years for the features to get in? Do I just wait every time I punch the enter key for 20 minutes for answers to come back? That works at some level, but again, 10 years from now, no. And I think the transition is right now. I think the time is ripe for people to make this transition, and I think it can be done with our Vector H technology. So Actian Vortex drops in there. Yarn enabled, fully certified, runs native on HDFS, is as native as you can get in Hadoop, and you can bolt your existing analytic workloads onto it. Bingo. Now that could be interesting. So let's look at some cases from my experience. And again, this is customers talking. So top global retail. This is one of the top 5 banks in the world. They had an analytic application of their own. It was running on Oracle. Surprise, surprise. It was breaking. It was breaking in a couple of interesting ways. They weren't getting price performance out of it. Data volumes were growing. But it was also breaking in ways that they weren't in the cool new world with new data sources, and they wanted to bring those data sources in. And so they tried some projects. In fact, they were trying Impala. We met them, and we said, no, why don't you try a mature enterprise class, extreme low latency columnar analytic database? They go, well, you have to be able to load 2 billion rows in 6 hours, and we loaded it in an hour, and you have to be able to query this 200 billion row table. 200 billion rows, this is a non-trivial test. And if you could just please do it in less than a minute, we would do somersaults. It came back in 1.5 seconds. Across the board on complex workloads, join, heavy queries, we were 100x faster than Impala. But that's just the performance. We were also fully functioning. You could bolt on every single piece of BI infrastructure that you had. You had user roles and security. You had the full enterprise class capabilities to bolt that top layer on. Went to a media company, the second one. Giant, 500 nodes of Hadoop, big Teradata shop, dying to do some replatforming. Couldn't get it done, couldn't get the performance, couldn't get the enterprise class, and said, wait, we'll just not do the project for 3 years. Well, that's painful. We stepped in with our database, again, price performance advantage, almost unmeasurable, certainly as they look over the spend in the next 5 years, and bingo, that's an opportunity for us to be the database for their replatformed analytic workload. Last one's healthcare. That was a SQL Server offload. That's a straight application doing payment analytics again. Running into the wall, running out of gas, not getting price performance, snap it into a modern infrastructure, plain sailing for the next 10 years. I was at an event, the session next door here yesterday, and the Seagate guy stood up and he said, yeah, we're using SQL and Hadoop, not ours. Good for him, it's a competitive world. But he did say, I was amazed. I took my traditional analytic workloads, I moved them across, and it was easy. And we'll talk about how easy it might be in a minute, but it's very possible. We have a large cap markets financial services company that saved $10 million by moving off a legacy database onto an analytic columnar database technology. So this is very real. So what are the guidelines? What are the tips that I can give you? So this is tips from the field, tips from customers doing this. Avoid rip and replace. This is not about replacing your whole EDW or anything. This is about finding those analytic workloads that are important, that are vital, and move them across. Look where the business logic resides. If it's woven into your T-SQL and your P-SQL and your stored procedures and deep in the database files, then shame on you. But if it is, that's going to be a hard one. But I've been amazed how often the analytic logic is up in the analytic tier, whether that's your SAS tool, whether that's your Tableau, whether it's your custom application. And people are using the database for row serving. They're using the database to get the data in and out, obviously. And yeah, that's an instant-on replatforming candidate. You have to set up the data interfaces, could be one-time migration, could be ongoing replication. We've seen all the patterns. Some people are decommissioning the old database and moving to the new one completely. Some people are keeping it around for a year and setting up sort of one-way simple replication. Some people are plugging into their existing ETL pipelines because that's a natural way. Some people are writing new ETL pipelines because there's only a handful of sources and that's cheaper and faster than the old source. So it's pretty easy to do. In fact, it's shockingly easy to do. So you want to target the most broken of your analytic apps. Standard apps are good. Reporting databases are really good. Reporting applications are really good. Simple data marts are really good. Ad hoc query is really good. You get into heavy data warehousing, heavy EDW. There are workloads that you can move across, but you're not forklifting that whole thing. That's coming in the years ahead. But you've got to focus on the analytic workloads that matter to you, the ones that are ripe for change, the ones that are broken now that would enjoy a new world of massive scalability and superior performance. And so that means clean SQL. If that analytic tier has relatively clean SQL, guess what? And you drop it on the new. And yeah, we've been shocked. We've seen migrations where they're done in the month is the longest one I've seen for simple clean SQL. So this gets us close to the end here. The tailwinds, there's all sorts of other goodness if you make this replatforming. So some of you are thinking, I can't really make the move. It's not, okay, it's a serious database, but is Hadoop ready? Hell, Hadoop is stunning in its richness. You're going to live where the data lives, not out in some remote province. You're going to enjoy no vendor lock-in. You're going to see the coolest innovation going on in ingest, whether it's real-time, streaming. The frameworks are amazing. We've done a lot of work with Kafka, with columnar and NoSQL databases, with Storm, with different frameworks, and it's just amazing how rich they are, how much more modern they are than traditional fabrics. You get to my unstructured data sources more easily. I'm ready for the IoT. I can enjoy Apache. It's not about Hadoop anymore. We call these things Hadoop distributions. They're really Apache distributions. The modern distributions have Spark in them and Kafka in them. Those aren't Hadoop. Those are independent Apache projects. That's really the open data platform, Apache, and we're all riding that wave, thank goodness. And you get to use it in your existing workloads. I've seen 5 different diagrams at this Hadoop Summit where they go, yeah, Hadoop's really cool, we're ingesting all the new data, we're pumping it through the pipeline, writing a lot of code, Spark's better than MapReduce, I'm still writing a lot of code, but I write faster, and I get it down to some analytic goodness, and it's a victory. And what do you do with the data then? Well, then I stick it out through this really itty-bitty straw, and I push it back into Teradata so that my consumers can actually consume it, because how do they consume it? With Tableau and Cognos and MicroStrategy and Excel. Well, why pump it out if you've got a fully natural, native in Hadoop SQL database at the end of your pipeline? Let it go in there and let them bolt Tableau right onto that. So there's tremendous possibilities here. So I'll summarize with this again. That's where you are today. That's out there. You could move those things across if you pick the right database. If you worry about data feeds, if you have the interfaces working back and forth, it's pretty simple to do. So that's it for my presentation. I'm telling you here that the early majority, the next great wave of Hadoop adoption is coming. It is not all early adopters. The big wave hasn't even hit yet. The key enabler is SQL, really rich SQL in Hadoop. And if you make the right choice on that SQL in Hadoop, and it's ripe to make now, not just us, there's things to look at. But if you make the right choice around SQL in Hadoop, you will go from being pinched and trapped on that death march to a new ecosystem with plain sailing on modern software where the data lives as far as you can see. So that's my advice to you. Take a look at your existing analytic workloads, see which ones are broken, and see if they're candidates to re-platform onto a modern platform with a modern columnar analytic database.